The irony of I'm a friend is just, it's hilarious. It really is. Because usually when someone decides to introduce themselves to our cast and crew, usually it means that that person is a stranger danger or a danger to the entire group because that person most likely has other motives. And to see this dude at the end of the episode, I'm willing to bet, I'm willing to place some money on it. I don't know though. But I'm willing to place some money that this dude that has probably been following our, cast members is probably one of the people that probably were a part of the butchering of the people in the last episode. I didn't really talk about that much in my last review, so I want to take some time to discuss that. In the last episode, clearly, all the butchering of the people, like you see people chopped up into little pieces, clearly that was foreshadowing for whatever's going to happen in the future of this season, because they wouldn't show us the butchering of these random people of the town and burnings of the houses, like the houses burnt to the ground and stuff, if those were not supposed to be key signs of foreshadowing of a future adversary for our gang. For instance, it's really weird. It's really weird how we found out how, like, this group was going across, the coast and killing people, butchering them up, burning people and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, this dude introduces himself like, I'm a friend. And that's just, that's alarm bells when you hear something like that. So, that dude, I'm willing to bet, very shady. He's probably evil, probably has a group, and probably is trying to screw over Rick and everybody else. So, we'll have to see how that goes. So, anyways, getting into the other details of this episode of The Walking Dead. So, we had a title drop. Straight up title drop. And I did not expect that. I don't think there's ever been a title drop in this series. Like, I mean, we've always heard of the Walkers, or, like, let's say, there's other random, like, zombie names they've given, zombies for the course of this series. But this is the first time I think we've ever had a title drop for The Walking Dead. Because Rick is sitting there talking about his past, his grandpa, pretty much, when he was in a war, and all of a sudden, after that, he's like, we are the Walking Dead, and I'm like, yo, that title drop, like, the straight-up title drop, like, damn, like, they're really going all out in this season. Like, the first episode of this mid-season started off with a very emotional episode with the ambience and stuff like that just really drew me in. And then this episode, it goes more in depth with the conflict of the characters and continuing to walk forward. That's pretty much what this episode means. Like, this episode's real meaning is just seeing the characters that have slowly had these hardships from the last season, like the first part of the last season. For instance, you know how they've lost a lot of people they loved and cared about, and now they're having to deal and cope with the loss of their loved ones, and having to figure out a way for they can move on and live on. And that's the true meaning of this episode, really, just to be straight to the point. And it's not a bad episode, because we needed to get these conflicts out of the way, and I'm glad when it came to the writing of this episode, it handled all these little mini conflicts between the characters very fast, because if it wouldn't have been handled in this episode, it would have been very bad for the future. For instance, the overall aspect of how some are getting very angry over the loss of their loved ones and taking the anger out on other, walkers and stuff like that. It's very obvious that that would have been very bad in the future if it would have continued like that. So I'm glad at the very end of this episode we had, a little bit of talk between all the characters that were having their own problems, and they got it settled by the course of the end of the episode. So next week we can pretty much get into probably more humans versus the humans for next week, because from judging by the preview of the next episode, from what I saw at the end of the episode, you see how the dude's getting searched by Rick and stuff, and they're not trusting this dude, and they're charging the zombies and stuff like that. So, it looks like we're going to have a very action-packed episode next week. Can't wait to see that. But overall, though, the episode is pretty much set up and just pretty much character progression. That's what it is, like the true meaning of it. And one thing I have to say is what Rick stated in this episode was just a pretty interesting way to view the world, or this new world that they're now living in. He used to say in the past, I think it was season 2, I remember Rick saying something like, he feels bad for the children that have to grow up in this world. I remember Rick saying that. And in this episode, Rick says pretty much the exact opposite. He's like, I used to say, I feel bad for the children growing up in this world. He's like, you know what? I really don't, because they growing up and they have to get accustomed to the world they're growing up in. And for instance, they have time to adjust to this world because they're not really used to the old world. And you have it to where these adults, they've already seen the viewpoint of how the world used to be, and now they're being forced to be in this new world. And so, honestly, it's like the adults got the bad end of the stick, because children, when they grow up, they get accustomed to what the world they're in, and so they really don't know the other world that they once had, like, for instance, how humanity once had. And to see how Rick brought this up, it's just very deep meaning, because it is true. Depending on where you grow up or where you live at, pretty much can judge the entire being of your personality itself. And so, that was very deep. I have to say, I like the writing in that scene. I like how the writers dived into that once again. Like, they just show you the different viewpoints of the characters and how they really view this dark and, you know, horrible world that they're currently living in. I wonder at the end of the day, though, are they ever going to really find a safe haven? Because if I was them, honestly, I would go up north and try to hide, or, you know, go to a deserted island or something. But, hey, it doesn't really matter, though. But at the end of the day, this episode was a very, very good episode. I have to say, really good progression. They managed to get one step closer to where they're going to Washington. And we also have a new enemy introduced at the end of this episode. So tell me your thoughts in the comments below. How do you feel about this week's episode? How do you feel about the ending? How do you feel about the character progression we had in this episode? Are you glad they settled all these little dramatic points, for instance, where we didn't have to deal with this drama between the characters for a majority of this half of the mid-season? Let me know. You all have a wonderful day or not wherever you live. Please be safe. Chibi out.